Hey everyone, today is going to be a quick look at the ROG CROSSHAIR X870E Hero. I have here in front of me a retail sample. This was sent to me by Asus, so there's only so much I can talk about in terms of showing you. I cannot show you certain things like performance, etc. like that, because of the embargo has not lifted yet. But what I can do is give you a quick overview of what's in the box, give you a quick talk about the board and its improvements over the X670E and show you some of the new quality of life improvements that they've introduced. So with that said, let's get started. I am also going to be including a teaser for the build that this is going into. It's very ROG, let's put it that way. So, okay, right away, I've removed the black plastic because I've taken a look at this board prior. But in the box, you'll notice that they've tried to stress the Q features that they've included this time. Q release, Q slide, Q latch. Q release, I'm going to show you guys, is this part. Q slide is if you want to use your own NVMEs, let's say like a Gen 5 or something like that, and you don't want to use the ROG heatsink, which is the motherboard heatsink, then you can use Q slide. And also Q latch, which is going to be the PCIe for the GPU. So just let me pull the board out real quick and we'll go over what's in the box and then we will touch on the board. Okay, so a couple changes in the box. Instead of getting the old manuals like we used to, like the bulky books, we're getting a quick start guide. This is essentially the first couple of pages in the original manuals that we do receive. And we also get a layout of the board right away. You don't have to flip inside the book to look for this out anymore. You kind of have your all the I/O and all the fan headers already pointed out. If you guys watched the Gamescom, one of the things they did introduce is the Q-Connect in the BIOS. I think it's called Q-Connect. I'm not sure. I don't remember off the top of my head. But it allows you to see what's connected to the fan ports and everything inside the BIOS. I can't show you that this video, but in the next video, when the build is complete, I will. Okay, so we get stickers. That's obligatory. And we get some motherboard. Let's see. Motherboard specification, Bluetooth updates, right? Bluetooth frequency range, and Asus web storage. Nothing really special over there. So you get a ROG membership card. This is, shouldn't be new to a lot of people. And then if we come into the accessory section, just make sure everything's on this side. Sometimes it falls over. We get SATA cables, 290 degree, 2 standard. You get a lot of the M2 pads. We'll just go through all that. And these are the Q slide covers. Pretty much it's best to show, if you check the website, it shows you how this works. It's kind of hard to show you, but essentially you clip on this on the opposing sides of the M2 and you can just clip it into place rather than using a screw. Then you have the RGB extension, your Q connect for the front. Let's see what else. You also get another Q slide. I think you have to use them in you only have to use one or in pairs. I think one at a time. All right, so then you have more M2 pads, USB stick. This Wi-Fi antenna, they did say that they've made improvements where even though it's an omnidirectional antenna, it should be able to kind of focus in the direction that your Wi-Fi source is coming from. I do have a Wi-Fi 7 mesh setup at home. It's also, I think I use the ROG GT98. It's a fairly new one. I have to say that thing has excellent range. I bought 2 of them, and it's just amazing how much it covers my home. My Wi-Fi speeds are ridiculous, guys. And also you have the bottle opener, which is new. It's metal. It's kind of a strange add-on, but I guess. I mean, it'd be cool if it fit a keychain, right? Rather than just this flat thing. But, it's always nice when they throw something in there. It doesn't have to make the world's most sense, but, it is what it is. Okay, so... Oh, sorry, guys. Let me put that back. With that said, we can move on to the board. Have to put this over here. So, let's just use the box for a second here and show you guys the Q-Connect before I forget. All right, so traditionally when you install your M2s, you have 2 screws, you unscrew it, and you take the M2 out. But this, you push, you remove. right? See how easy that was? This allows you to install an M2. It's completely screwless installation, right? And you've noticed that they've actually improved the thermal pad here. Previously, they put a long strip, and I don't know about you guys, but the circular parts in the middle always came off for me. It was really annoying. But it's good to see that, you know, they've kind of minimized it as well. And then here, you just slide in, and it clicks. This just makes it extremely easy if you want to change your M2 when you already have it in the case. You also don't need to worry about dropping the screw. Even though they're captive on Asus boards, sometimes you can never really tell. And it was also really hard to screw in, especially with the formula, where you had this cover and it was over here. It was really hard to line up the holes and everything like that. And this just makes it so much easier. I don't know if I can remove this to show you the M2 slots underneath, but there are 2 slots here and 2 slots here. So there's 5 M2 slots on this board. Obviously, using all 5 is going to require some type of accommodation, whether by slowing down a lane, disabling a SATA port, or maybe this mini SAS. That I'm gonna have to look at the manual, which I'm not gonna do right now, but we will go over that in the next video about this board. Okay, so just to show you guys the Q release here. Previously on the Z690, Asus had introduced a tab that you could push that would have a wire, and essentially it unlocked this PCIe pin right here. See how it clicks into place? You notice that it's spring-loaded now. It actually literally snaps right back, right? Before, no board had this, right? Now it snaps right back. You can hear that. So if I were to put this GPU in, and you know, I can't reach it, I don't have to press it, I can just pull, and it snaps back. See? So that makes it easy removal. You don't have to worry about it anymore. Especially with very large GPUs, it can be very hard to get into there. So this was a cool mechanism as well, but if you can simplify it, why not? So that's really cool. They've done this for both slots, as you can see, right? Spring loaded. And with that said, let's go over some of the board itself. Starting from the top right-hand corner, you have your CPU optional, CPU. These are, for those folks that don't know, CPU optional and CPU are essentially clones of each other. Whatever you have set on CPU, CPU optional is going to do. Then you have AIO, and then you have a channel fan header, ARGB, start, flex key, which you can set to whatever you want in the BIOS. By default, it's going to be a reboot. And then you have a safe boot, which is essentially posting the last successful post settings. Okay, and then you have your 24-pin, your 8-pin. This is for additional GPU power. I think some places like to call it ATX 3.1. But I mean, a lot of boards have had it. They used to have them on the bottom. If you guys don't remember, some of the higher end boards would have additional power for the PCIe slot on the bottom down here. Then you have USB-C. You have 4 SATAs, another USB-C, USB 3. Coming around down here, we have another USB-C, another USB 3, and 2 USB 2s. Now, if you notice right away, this is more than normal, right? For those folks that have a Hyperion or some of the larger towers like a Lanley V3000, you may be wondering, how come I can't populate all my case I/O? Well, that's because most cases don't have 2 USB 3s, or they don't have, I mean, most boards don't have 2 USB Cs. They're giving it to you here. Previously, the only board that comes off the top of my head that gave you all of this were the some of the godlikes from MSI and the X670E 670E Extreme, which brings up a point. For those of you wondering, what is the difference between the E and the non-E? Well, the difference is the E's, just like the previous chipsets, have 2 chipsets chips on them. So that gives you the additional I/O, which allows you to do things like the 5 M2 slots here. If you just buy a regular X870, you're not going to get the same amount of I/O. Now, some of the more budget boards are going to trend to be the X870. Obviously, the build cost is cheaper, and they're also going to have cut downs, right? So you might have 2 Gen 5 lanes here, but on a cheaper board, you might have a Gen 5 and a Gen 4. I've actually seen a board where it's Gen 3. So, you know, you kind of get what you pay for. Moving on to the back, rear side, you have your BIOS switch, your BIOS flashback, your clear CMOS, HDMI. You get 2, two 40 gigabit USB-Cs, and then one, two, so that's 6. So then you get, no, that's 8. Wow. So you get 8 10 gigabit USBs. That is a lot of USBs, right? And then you get 2 LAN ports, you get a Wi-Fi 7. This uses the push-through, direct push-in antenna instead of the screw-in that Asus used to have. This kind of antenna connector was, I think, introduced late in the Z790. I think it's probably with the Dark Hero, if I remember correctly. But essentially this, if you guys notice the I/O here, and you notice all the I/O here, you can kind of say that they've essentially given you the extreme in an ATX package. Granted, there's obviously some less options, there's less switching for certain things, but for those of you that don't know, there is going to be no extreme gene for X870E. None planned in the meantime. What I mean by is, obviously with anything, as demand is there, if there's enough volume movement on, for example, the 9000 X3D chips, then obviously Asus may look into refreshing the boards to have that. Now, for those of you that are wondering about BTF, unfortunately, there's no BTF now. That doesn't mean there won't be BTF later. Obviously, Asus is going to be introducing Z890 BTF. We did see that at Computex. So BTF is going to continue, just unfortunately right now, not on the AM5 socket. Okay, so moving on to the back, we get a back plate. This is the first Hero on AM5 with a back plate, or any AMD with a back plate, for that matter. We didn't have the back plates on the Heroes until, I think, with my fingerprints especially. We didn't have these until the Z790s is when they started adding the back plates. So it's nice to see it here. I have to say, they've done it, you've noticed, they've actually also gone back a little bit with the heat sinks. The curvature, I don't know, it's hard to see in the light here, it's all blackboard. But the curvature is kind of reminiscent of the Prime series on the heat sinks. It's not flat, that flat look that we've had for a couple years now. And it's really fingerprinty. But I have to say, the board feels good in the hand. It definitely, it feels better than most Heroes that I've had. I would say when I held this Z790 BTF Hero, I was like, oh wow, this feels like an extreme level board. Minus no backplate, but that's a whole nother situation. But yeah, so they've definitely upped the ante a little bit. Price-wise, I don't know the price. I'd assume last generation was 600. This, given the additional I/O, which is one other reason you may want, for those people wondering, if X670 is the same essentially as X870, why should I buy the newer board? Okay, so if you're in the Asus product stack, you're buying the newer board for the USB Gen 4 upgrades and the Wi-Fi 7. This is not available on previous Asus AM5 boards. It was available on some of the later released AM5 boards from other AIBs, other vendors, not Asus. So you pretty much have to get the X870 to get the Wi-Fi 7 and the Gen 4 USB. So that's one reason. Two, unless you get a really good deal on last generation's boards, which are still very viable, there's no reason to pay similar money when there's a newer product, right? And if you're coming from AM4 and you're jumping into AM5, you don't want to deal with the Intel business. This is the, you're obviously going to do this. Speaking of which, I don't want to sound like a defender of Asus pricing or anything. I mean, they are premium items. But with the whole Intel fiasco, with the voltages, a lot of people don't realize if you're running like something like a ROG board, you can actually go into the BIOS and you can see the lifetime average voltage of your CPU in the socket the entire time. This is not a feature that's found on other boards, right? So I have to say, for a lot of guys, if you spent the money on the board, do yourself a favor, take the time to read the BIOS manual and learn more about the BIOS, because you're paying for a lot of features that you may not be using that may be very helpful for you, right? So that pretty much wraps up the overview of the board. I will now give you guys a quick teaser of the case that it's going into and we'll move on from there. Okay guys, this is pretty much the Tower 600 I've been working on. If you've watched me on Instagram, this is obviously a modified Tower 600, and it was done intentionally for this board. Okay, obviously I've done a lot of things to it, which I'll go into when the build is finished. If you guys are wondering where is my GPU going to go, it's going to go on that floor in front of the motherboard. All the tubing will be hidden. You will not see any tubing for the CPU or GPU. All right, I'm going to be using a stealth block. I'm running the GPU tubing through a mount rather than, so I really don't have space. But I have two 420 radiators on each side. And on the bottom, I've added an 8.8 screen to track stats. Obviously a USB implementation, not HDMI. But yeah, so I'm looking forward to getting this finished. So if you're interested in seeing how this comes out, just follow my channel and you will see it soon enough. But yeah, so with that said, thanks for watching, stay safe and take care.